Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You are in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Today, we are talking about multicultural marketing to help us understand how to authentically reach diverse audiences and why this matters more than ever for your business. I'm joined by Cathy Murphy, CEO and founder of Venus Media. With over 20 years in media at CBS, Pandora, and Facebook, Cathy saw a major gap in how brands connect with women, LGBTQ+, and multicultural audiences. That's why she created Venus Media, where she's working to transform the media landscape by making inclusivity the standard. Today, she's here to share how we can all move beyond surface level diversity marketing into strategies that actually work. Welcome to the show, Cathy.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. I'm so excited to be here today.
So excited to have you on. Now, some of you know on the show, sometimes we're bringing on guests that are experts that I don't necessarily know or haven't met before. And this is our first conversation. And I'm pleased to have Cathy on. I've known Cathy now for a couple of years, 2-3 years. And I've already learned so much from her in our time getting to know each other. And this episode has been a long time coming. So I'm so excited.
It's perfect timing, actually. So I'm excited too.
Amazing. So let's get started. I want to just kind of ask, why should multicultural marketing be a priority for growing brands? And really, I guess even before getting into that, like, how do we define multicultural marketing to start with?
Yeah, I think the definition has really evolved over the past decade. I think before, people thought of multicultural marketing as a box maybe they had to check. When I used to sell ads on radio or on TV, it would be like, yep, 10% of our budget is carved out so we can, reach a Black audience, or we can reach the Hispanic audience. And then the rest is going to what we call general market advertising. And the fact of the matter is the general market is multicultural. You look at a market like New York, for example, where almost 30% of New Yorkers identify themselves as Latino. That means there's no longer this, hey, we should just carve out this small percentage of the budget like we used to. It means that you really have to think more about an inclusive strategy to reach a lot of different people. And it's really more about the cross-section of culture, cultural identity, how people think about things that are culturally relevant to them, and then trying to market to them in a way that really speaks to them. So it's no longer this one-size-fits-all approach, right? Of, hey, I'm going to put a couple of ads on this Hispanic TV station, they're in Spanish. So I've checked the box. And that's how a lot of people used to think about multicultural marketing. Unfortunately, it's actually how a lot of people still think about multicultural marketing. And more important in today's ever-evolving landscape, that you're really having an inclusive strategy where you can say, okay, I don't think that people that are Black are a monolith. They don't all think the same. They're not from the same backgrounds. They don't speak the same languages. They have different cultural identifiers, whether it's food or music. We can't just put them all in a box. And same with the Latino audience or the Asian audience. And so now when you're thinking about multicultural marketing, you really have to think about, how can I appeal to all of these individuals in a way that's cohesive, but that also is culturally relevant and speaks to them?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said about, multicultural marketing, or the multicultural kind of segment is the general market. Like
Yeah.
the market is multicultural, and so you have to think of all of your approaches as appealing. But I also want to understand too what you say about like the language and that, you know, translating an ad from English into Spanish is not multicultural marketing, right? So what are the other kind of components that we need to be thinking about and understand in order to do it right instead of just, as you say, tick that box?
Yeah. First of all, the tagline for my business is multicultural marketing is mainstream marketing, and
Mhm.
we say that for a reason. Back to what I said, in the last question, it's just so important to think about, inclusivity all around. And let me give you an example. I think it's best illustrated when I talk about one of our clients who was thought that they were doing the right thing by having a sign up in their business that said, had the flags, we translate for you in 7 different languages. And for the Spanish language, they had up a flag of Spain. And they thought, great, we've checked the box. We have, we show that we are in Spanish and we have a flag of Spain up. And this is a business located in New York City. The challenging thing with that is that most of the Latino audience, not all, but many of the Latino audience that live in and around New York City are not from Spain and don't identify with Spain as being like their hub. You're talking about countries that most of them emancipated from Spain and or fought wars against them to be their own countries. And so my culture, for example, I'm Colombian. I see somebody from Spain as European. If I see a Spain flag up, I don't immediately have that association of, oh, this is Spanish, right? In
Mhm.
New York, you might think to put up a flag from Mexico or from the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico or any number of other places where people have Spanish as their main language. And so when you're thinking about that, you really have to think inclusively about what that might look like and how that might translate. And that nuance is really, really important and particular. The way the vocabulary is between people from Puerto Rico versus people from Venezuela versus people from Spain, you might not even think that they're speaking the same language sometimes. And so
Mhm.
that's really, really an important through line when you're thinking about how to market to them, because it's not just, hey, Google Translate for this. It could get lost in translation, literally. And nobody wants to be that brand that's offensive.
Mm.
Nobody wants to be that brand that goes viral because you said that something's really important. I mean, we can use the Sydney Sweeney example, right? That, talking about how her jeans are amazing and then showing a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, how that went so viral because many people were really offended by that. And so I think it's really important for brands to listen, pay attention, and hire culturally representative experts. You have to have a team of people sitting around the table that are reflective of what the United States is today. And if you have a table of 10 white men sitting around and making all of the decisions and saying, let's just throw it into Google Translate and that's good, that's not good anymore. That's not good enough anymore. And that's where you get in these tricky situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to dig more into that later, but I do want to kind of tap into that fear of getting it wrong that you mentioned. And maybe the Sydney Sweeney example, they clearly were not making an attempt at multicultural marketing at all in that example. But a lot of brands, I think, are genuinely afraid of getting it wrong or worried about being called out for pinkwashing or tokenism. And what would you say to a marketing leader who maybe wants to do this right, but is paralyzed by that fear?
Yeah, paralyzed gets nobody anywhere when you're running a business. I think the best thing that you can do is have focus groups, test it out on a lot of different markets, hire an expert, a marketing expert or a media expert that has that cultural background and can come in and say, no, actually, this doesn't really translate it well, or this doesn't sit right with me, or I'm concerned about that. I think there's a lot of things that you can do before you go to market and spend millions of dollars on advertising, or even hundreds of dollars on advertising, that makes sense, right? You can crowdsource through friends of friends. You can crowdsource through having a more diverse, group in your leadership. You can crowdsource through doing some even light A/B testing that would allow people to give you feedback. But there is no reason that an ad like that so many people found offensive should have made it that far. They clearly did not do focus groups or things like that to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's a trend, or not a trend, but a consistent theme that I see whenever there's, sort of these viral bad PR moments for these brands. You can tell that nobody asked anybody about this. Nobody showed this to anyone. Kendall Jenner and Pierre, all those examples
Exactly.
over the years, like they're clearly that group of sort of homogenous people in a room approved something without either testing in market or getting expertise or a well-rounded kind of view. And I wanted to ask earlier, and I was sort of feeling like we were already touching on it, but like, what are the biggest mistakes that you see brands make when they're trying to do this stuff? And, is that part of it? Is it, the lack of research? Oh, sorry, my dog is getting very involved in this conversation today. Is it more about, those language and sort of, those challenges we talked about? Like, I guess those fall into it, but.
Well, mistake number one, we've already touched on, which is assuming that you're doing general market advertising and you have one ad and it fits all.
Mm-hmm.
That is, you cannot do that in today's environment. You really can't. So you have to have different versions. You need to have people that are reflective of a variety of different cultures physically present in your ads. You may need to have some of them translated into a variety of different languages. Certainly in New York, I advise all of my clients that they should have ads in minimum in Spanish and also in Mandarin. Again, that's a minimum baseline in a market this diverse. I would also say that about markets like Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles. That's table stakes to me. So mistake number one is assuming that your general market ad is going to reach everybody and speak to everybody the same way. Assuming that one segment of the population or culture is a monolith, which is the second thing that we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. All Latinos, they all speak the same language and have the same cultural heritage. Look at me. I'm blonde hair, blue eyes. My name is Cathy Murphy. Do you think anybody ever thinks when I walk into a room that I identify as Latina? Absolutely not, right? And I, for many years, have struggled with people not thinking I'm Latina enough. And I'm overcompensating by saying, hey, I go to Colombia every year. I eat Colombian food. I listen to the music. And then I just quit doing that. I quit overcompensating because you can't put me in a box. Mm-hmm. I identify as Latina. Spanglish ads, Spanish ads, English ads, they all resonate with me. It depends what platform I'm on and what I'm consuming at that time. And so the second pitfall is that the assumption that one segment of the population is monolith. And I think the third biggest pitfall that I see is, and we have to be really careful of this in an AI-driven environment, is, I can just, Google translate something and that's going to be the answer. And I really caution brands against doing that because it's not the answer. It's probably going to get you into trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tricky one because the technology is available, but it doesn't mean that it's good. So let's be careful using that. And I think that even a direct translation, even maybe done by an expert, doesn't necessarily translate cultural context and nuance. And there's additional factors to consider. I have a client who does workshops called Humor versus Humor with the OU and the O. And, she's specifically works in the Montreal market where there's a big difference between French Canadian and English in that market. And it's not a it's not solely a language difference. It is a big cultural difference, and understanding that is so key. Which I think it's hard to know where to start. Again, if you don't have people in your business that can help, a diverse kind of team, even maybe not necessarily culturally. I love this story of when YouTube first launched, that people who were left-handed, their videos were uploading upside down.
Yep.
Because they were recording, they didn't have any people who were left-handed on the team when they developed the platform, right? So even things like that, like you need to make sure that you've got, and if you don't have it in-house, to, like you said, hire experts that can come in and help you with that sort of thing, to help round out the experience, the opinions, the expertise.
Yeah, because the consequences are enormous if you go the other route. So I don't mean this to paralyze people, quite the opposite, right? It's just there has to be a lot of consideration and thought in the beginning. And that doesn't mean you can't do it. You can do it. And you can hire people that will help you do that. But the consequence of having this Pepsi, Jenner moment it's years later that people are still talking about that negative impact is years in the making. And with social media today, your brand can't afford that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think maybe 10 years ago or whenever it was that ad came out, Pepsi, being the size that they are, could recover from something like that. But there's so many smaller brands out there that are emerging and growing so quickly and have, the ability to reach audiences that they couldn't before, that they'll eat right into your market share. They're doing a better job.
Yeah, 100%.
So we talk about the consequences and the risks, and maybe that is scaring people a little bit. So why don't we pivot over to what success looks like? What does it look like when a brand gets this right, and maybe the key elements of effective multicultural marketing and how that can actually impact your business?
Yeah, I will say one of a great example that I absolutely love recently is that Calvin Klein used Bad Bunny in their latest set of ads. I feel like they tapped into the hype, right? Bad Bunny's everywhere. He's going to perform at the Super Bowl. He hosted SNL. Clearly they saw this rising moment. And even the fact that the Super Bowl is going to have Bad Bunny perform, which I know has been met with some controversy, but I think it's really tapping into this, this is the intersection of culture. This is what's happening. People that are English that don't speak a word of Spanish love Bad Bunny's music. And to me, that's not a foreign concept, because when I go to Colombia, I see all of my family singing English songs. They might not even know what they mean, but music is something that's transcends. And so I love that Calvin Klein did that and had Bad Bunny. I think that was a really great example of a culturally relative opportunity. And some people, I'm sure, probably saw it as a big risk, or I don't know, are we sure that this is the right move? And hands down, I believe that it was the right move for them. And the positive talk around that was great. I think the biggest thing that I see is brands that care, that are at least trying to do the right thing, are getting more recognition, because the fact is people can vote with their dollars now. And we've always done that. But in particular, in today's economy, you're seeing big shifts around how it can impact businesses negatively and positively. Let me use Target and Costco as an example. When Target came out at the beginning of the year and rolled back some of their DEI initiatives, there was a really big impact. The Black community in particular, but also the Latino community, were like, we're not going to shop at Target anymore. And Target has seen 7, 8, 9% declines in foot traffic, because we decided, no, that's not a place we want to spend our dollars, because it's not supporting the communities that we live in and that we're a part of. Conversely, I don't know if you've been to Costco lately, but I mean, I was there 2 weekends ago. I could barely walk in the door. I felt like I was going to Madison Square Garden, or like it was insane how packed Costco was, and full of people of color. And not just because the pricing is great and all of those things. Yes, that's important, but Costco has seen, plus 10% in memberships and foot traffic and all of that, because again, brands are choosing, or people are choosing to vote for brands with their dollars. So I think that if you're showing that you are inclusive to everybody, I like to say when I'm pitching business, hey, I don't just talk this talk. I walk the walk. Look at my team. My team is representative of various cultures and backgrounds and ages and LGBTQ and everything in between for a reason, so that we have these diverse perspectives and really fascinating conversations where we learn a lot about each other and our cultures. So you think if you're trying could look like hiring the first woman onto your board. Trying could look like having somebody of color sit at the table and participate in the conversation. Trying can look like starting to dip your toe into advertising to Latinos. Trying could look like showing people of color in your ads and making that culturally representative. So I think there's a lot of little things, believe it or not, that companies can do that will help them reach a more diverse audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love the examples that you shared. I think the Target one is really interesting because it not only, them kind of rolling back DEI initiatives isn't a marketing thing, right? That's just their business, but it was in direct conflict with some of their marketing, which I think is really interesting, to have a pride line in June at the stores that's from your own private label, and then kind of roll back some of those things. I think we saw something similar happen with Ulta, where I saw their CEO do an interview talking about the benefits of DEI and how their business has grown with a more diverse, sort of employee makeup. But at the same time, they're doing advertising with Matt Rife, who had been making jokes about domestic violence in his comedy acts, right? So when you're doing things that your marketing is in direct conflict with the business, that does seem disingenuous. Absolutely. And that doesn't seem authentic. But if some of those tips that you shared, like trying and, hiring a woman to your board, or, talking about the different diverse backgrounds of your people, and making an effort, putting that foot forward, I think that can be really powerful. I'm curious about your thoughts on the Calvin Klein example. Is that, was that in your opinion, like a sort of a cultural statement from the brand that was meant to appeal to anyone, or are they looking to appeal to a new audience? Like, is this a marketing approach to say, hey, we really want to appeal to a Latino or Hispanic audience? Or, is it, hey, we're going to make a statement more broadly about society and where we stand, and what we think is important? Or I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's hard to say, not being in their boardroom or a decision maker there, but I think it's both. I think that Calvin Klein recognizes that there is this cultural intersection that has been happening, quite frankly, that a lot of brands just still haven't recognized yet. I'm going to go back to my original stat. 30% in New York alone of people walking around that you see every day identify as Latino. And the fact is that by 2050, the minority will be the majority in this country, right? There will be enough people that are minority, from Asian, Black, Hispanic, all kinds of mixed races, different countries, different languages. The minority is going to become the majority. And so realizing that 25 years earlier and setting that stage is really, really important, right? And so I think that Calvin Klein was like, listen, Bad Bunny is just a big artist, worldwide, world known, and they want to recognize that. And oh, by the way, now perhaps we can we can tap into a new audience. And I talk a lot about new audiences with my clients because there's a lot of fear around these words, right? Diversity, inclusivity, but there's not fear around reaching a new audience. And so for a long time in the media space, these culturally diverse audiences have been referred to as just that, underserved, traditionally underserved, right? I'm flipping the script on that. I want to call these audiences what they are, which is a new audience. It's a new opportunity for you to get more people excited about your brand and excited about wanting to, again, vote with their dollars. And if you're not doing that, then you've really got to look inward and say, it's time. We have to do this. But just because such a large percentage of the population identifies in a way that is not just homogenous anymore. And so I think there's a real opportunity to reach new audiences, and Calvin Klein is tapping into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I want to talk about that homogenous team that you touched on earlier in the conversation. If a company has a lack of diversity in their internal makeup of their teams, but they want to authentically reach diverse audiences outside, what is that path forward? Do they need to diversify their team? Are there other ways to approach responsibly? Yeah.
Diversifying your internal team should be number one. And that diversity can come in a lot of forms. Look around the table and say, who of the people that are decision makers here, do we all look the same? Do we have the same opinions? Are we thinking the same? And diversity comes in a lot of formats today, right? It's not just color of skin. That's important. It could be gender diversity. It could be age diversity. Do you have people that are 60 at the table and people that are 30 at the table? That's probably a good place to start, right? So it also could be political diversity. Do we have people that think very differently about politics and the way of the world? Because that could affect how your brand is positioning itself. So I think diversity comes in a lot of different ways, and you got to look around the table and say, does everybody look like me here? Are we all just agreeing on everything all of the time? And if so, then that means somebody is either not comfortable enough to speak out, or you don't have the right people sitting at the table. So that's probably the first place that I would go. The second place that I would go, if you do have that and you're like, shoot, but we got to launch our marketing campaign next week, so I don't have time to hire diversity yet. It's on the roadmap. You should hire somebody that knows how to do that, right? And so I think that a lot of brands today are really craving working with teams that are more representative and more inclusive. So if you can't hire inwards for it, you can definitely hire outward for it.
Yeah, that's really smart. And hopefully people are trying to hire inward for that, not just for marketing, but for business growth.
It's the business. It's just really the business. Yeah.
There's so many studies out there about how companies grow when they have a diverse team versus when they don't. So it feels like there's still some maybe resistance to it in some ways. And I don't know what that's about in certain businesses, but the numbers are there. The data's there. It's good for business to have a diverse team.
I would also say that you should be pushing people that you do business with to also be more diverse.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I had a conversation with our accounting firm for my company.
Yeah.
And he's a great accountant. I love him. He's a white man. And he put a second person on our business who was also a white man. And then he said he was going to put a third person on our business who was also a white man. And I went on our meeting and I said, how about you hire some women? We like working with women. Yeah. Right. And I really unabashedly challenged him up front. Right. How do we, this is all good and well, but we're a female agency and most of our vendors at least have women on their team. And I think he was taken aback that I, challenged him. But I've done that a lot of times, right? I'm unafraid to really stand up and say that. I worked with a a CPG brand about 7 years ago, and all of their ads, their website, everything only showed white women. Why? Because they were, white women that were, from the Northeast. And they, thought like, oh, this is great. It's like a product for all of our friends and family. It's like, no. This is a product literally for everybody. And you have to diversify that, but you have to push those boundaries with your clients, your vendors, the people you're talking to every day, and saying, hey, how come we don't have more representation from your side on the room too?
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, and just something to, I push back on. And especially if that's a priority for you in your business and you are partnering with companies outside, then it doesn't seem unusual to me that you would want to work with other partners or consultants or whatever that have a similar approach or philosophy, or see the value in the way that you do. Not to say that white men are not great accountants. I'm sure they are. But a little mix.
No complaints except for this.
Yeah. Amazing. I'd love to hear, maybe you have an example from one of your clients or just from observations out in the world of a brand that you think has really transformed their approach. Like, what did they change, and what was the result of being able to shift their focus from maybe a lack of diversity to that multicultural approach?
Wow, that is such a great question. And I'm, immediately racking my brain and trying to think about brands that I think have done that really well. I think a lot of beauty brands have done that very well. I certainly remember the days of going into stores and thinking about, shades of foundation or whatever, even lipstick colors. And they very much felt like they were meant for 2 or 3 shades of fairer skin. I look at a brand like Fenty. I look at a brand like Rare Beauty, and to see how they have really made shades for every skin color, lipsticks that are shades I may never wear, but like look amazing on darker skin, and have advertising that reflects that. They're authentic in the way that they approach that. Their social media reflects that. Their ads reflect that, and they're walking the walk. And listen, by no surprise, both of those brands are led by diverse women. But I think, we need more of that, please. And they're 2 great examples of companies that have not just talked the talk, they walk the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are really great examples, and just the industry as a whole, how that's transformed over the years. I also think that Lady Gaga's brand House Labs, they have a reputation of having some of the darkest shades of foundation, and that's owned and run by a white woman, but a white woman who cares enough to bring people into her space that can do this properly. And she gets a lot of credit around the sort of social media beauty community about actually doing it right. And it's a great example of what you shared. I mean, Rare Beauty and Fenty are run by, diverse teams, but Lady Gaga is a white woman, and she knows how to get the right people around her. And really through everything she does has demonstrated that she cares, which is what you mentioned, like just trying. And even if you get it wrong, demonstrating that you're trying to do it right can go a long way.
I mean, the way that Lady Gaga has embraced the LGBTQIA community too is just, unbelievable. And so I think that she is doing things authentically. And it's a really great point that you brought up, Jen. I'm a white woman. I identify as Latina, but I'm a white woman. Many times when I walk into rooms, again, people don't believe I'm Latina. And the amount of times I've been in rooms where people are talking negatively about Latinos is astounding, because they think, oh, I'm white and I can say this around you. And I have to call that behavior out very quickly. It took me a long time to find my voice in that, candidly. But I think if you are a white man, I think if you are a white woman, you can still bring people into your circle. You can still be an ally. And an ally means all the things that we're talking about today. It means standing up. It means hiring diversity. It means advocating. It means being representative of multiple cultures and ethnicities. So just because you're white, if you're listening to this podcast, doesn't mean like, oh, I can't do anything about this. Actually, you have the privilege to be able to do something about it. And Lady Gaga is a great example of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great point too, that maybe you have actually more power to have an impact, and recognizing that is really important, and kind of how you can use your privilege to have an impact on your business, the industry, the world, all of those things.
Yeah.
Sort of finding your voice. It's a great segue too. I mean, if somebody's listening in today or maybe later on, what's one thing somebody could do like this week to start incorporating multicultural marketing or improve what they're already doing? One simple change they can make.
Look around the table. That's it. Just recognize, do you have a diverse team? Age diverse, culturally diverse, men and women. That's it. Just to take stock in what is sitting around your table, your own circle of influence. If everybody is answering things the same way, you have a problem, and that can be fixed.
Yeah.
The second step would be go to the people you do business with and do the same thing. Are all the people I do business with also white women? Are all the people I do business with, all look like me and talk like me? And that's the only way you're going to really start to make a change in your marketing, your media strategies, your go-to-market. All of that is looking around the table first, trying to fix that on the inside. If you want a tangible example of what somebody could do, I would say do your research, do some research on who is actually buying your product or service, and you might be really surprised. And that can be done really easily with post surveys, after people buy your product, and you'll start to see trends. Is only 5% of the people buying my product or service Latino or Black? If so, that's an opportunity. What a huge opportunity. If 30% of the market is Latino and only 5% of them are buying your product or service, wow, what a growth opportunity to go after that other 25%.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great mindset to have too. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity.
No, it's an opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, before we wrap, like all this conversation about really looking internally into your business, as opposed to, we're not starting with the marketing and the message and going out, right? It's all starting with internal, but the concept of DEI is kind of under fire a little bit right now.
Very much so.
Which is shocking. But here we are. So I guess, like, how do you think about, like, I have my own opinions about the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But yeah, I guess for people who are kind of that mindset of maybe that's a bad thing for my business, how do you think about that, even just in building your own team?
First of all, I love what you said: diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we call it that and you single out each one of those words and you say, okay, you don't want diversity in the people that buy your product or service. You don't want equity. For the equity is usually the one where people really get hung up on.
Sure.
You don't want equity for people, right? Inclusivity, you don't want people to feel like they too can benefit from your business, whether it's a service or a product. When you break it down like that, instead of just calling it DEI has this negative connotation now, unfortunately. I think if you can break down the words diversity and equity and inclusion, and you really speak about that authentically to people, you'll realize people don't have a problem with it, right? Because maybe the word diversity, they might have a negative, and then you can break down inclusion, and maybe you don't want people to feel included. Maybe they still have an issue with that. But when you talk about equity, you don't want people to feel like equal in the conversation. A lot of you'll see that the tone in the conversation is going to really change. And so I think that that's a really important thing to point out. The other thing that I would say is it's just good business. It's good business to have growth opportunities, and growth opportunities are coming and are here for new audiences, right? So if you're feeling like I am tapped out, I've reached all the people I can possibly reach that want my product or service, I guarantee that is not the case. Could you go after a younger subset? Could you go after an older subset? Could you go after people that are LGBTQ that also might love whatever it is that you're offering and speak to them in a different, authentic way? Can you go after the growth audience of Latinos, of Asians, of Blacks that live in this country? I guarantee that there is a growth opportunity in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point to kind of break that out. The concepts individually, people aren't typically opposed to, but the DEI has gotten some bad press.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. I also think people just have this like assumption that hiring diversely is in direct conflict with qualification for roles, which just hasn't been my experience, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I don't know where that comes from, but I do think that, not necessarily focusing on hiring diversely, but focusing on having a diverse pool of candidates to choose from.
Yeah.
The people who are the most qualified will surface to the top regardless. And it's often meets the diversity criteria that you were so afraid to prioritize. So,
and again, if you can't hire for immediately internally, you can hire out for it. You can hire a firm like mine, right? Shameless plug for Venus Media, but you could hire a firm like mine that is representative, that is diverse in a lot of ways. And we'll come in and analyze your business, and we'll help break it down for you and help make those choices. And that's okay too. So if you don't have it internally, a very simple step is hire somebody that can come in and be that, sounding board for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today, Cathy. This was a great conversation, as always. I knew it would be. And please, everybody, make sure you're following Venus Media, follow Cathy on LinkedIn. I really loved having you on, so thank you so much.
Awesome conversation. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more conversations that help demystify the complex world of marketing. See you then.